Hi everybody, welcome back, glad you could tune in again. Okay, so we're thinking about critical theory, and this is the second part of our historical overview, mapping some of the key steps in the development of this ideology. And in the previous video, you remember we looked at the significance of the emergence of the idea of heredity and the impact that that had on the putative justifications for the slave trade and colonialism in the twisted minds of people who attempted to argue for that in the 16th through the 18th or 19th centuries. We looked also at the rise of Marxism and the Frankfurt School of Philosophy in Frankfurt, Germany in the 1920s and 30s. That takes us up to about the early middle part of the 20th century. What I want to do today is to just point you to three further thinkers who take us from that point up to the present day. And as we do so, we're really just going to be spelling out what they said, not going into great detail in terms of critique. We'll turn to the critique of these thinkers and some of their ideas in the next video as we start to try and analyse this worldview in a little more detail. So without further ado, three thinkers whose writings and whose work and whose thought have formed significant steps on the road towards what we now recognise as critical theory. Number one, Derek Bell. Derek Bell was a legal scholar. He was a professor at Harvard Law School in the 70s and 80s. He was the first black professor at Harvard Law School, as it happens. And his interest was in the way in which the identity groups, particularly racial groups, black and white, interact with legal structures and other social structures. And he made a couple of claims about how the law works in human societies, and particularly how different races interact with each other in legal contexts. In particular, number one, he claimed that racism is not something strange and unusual, but is the ordinary state of affairs in human society. It's just the way things are. Human societies, he said, are racist. That doesn't mean it's okay that they're racist. It just means it's inescapable that human societies are racist. So if you're looking at a legal decision or any other social interaction, your question should not be, Derek Bell says, is there racism going on here? The question should be, where is the racism here? There will be racism here, he says. The question is, where is it? A second pillar of his thought, which he bequeathed to future generations of thinkers in the critical theory school, was the idea of what has become known among critical theorists as interest convergence. This is the idea that a dominant group, for Derek Bell, the dominant group would be white people, only act in favour of oppressed groups. For Derek Bell, that would be black people, when their interests converge. Derek Bell, to put it another way, would say that if a group of white people in power did something which seemed to favour black people who they were oppressing, they didn't do that because they cared for black people. They only did it out of cynical self-interest, because it just happened that by doing these oppressed people a favour, they were actually helping themselves. Derek Bell analysed the Brown versus Board of Education decision in the middle of the 20th century and claimed that this was an example of this. He said that actually what happened as a result of the Brown versus Board of Education decision is that black people in many contexts suffered greatly, and the only reason why white people who were in control of the legal process at the time forged ahead with this decision was because it was in their interests to do so. So a couple of contributions from Derek Bell, and if you know anything about critical theory, you'll already see the echoes of his thought in the ideas that are common among modern critical theorists. We'll come to that, as I said, in the next video. A second significant figure was the postmodernist philosopher Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault wrote a great deal about the relationship between knowledge on the one hand and the exercise of political or social power on the other. Foucault's big idea on this theme is well known, but just to remind you, if you've come across it before, or to alert you to it if you've not, Foucault believed that claims about knowledge in relation to any domain, science, maths, history, geography, social structures, claims about knowledge are actually disguised political claims. That is, they are power plays in disguise. If somebody claims to be informing you about something, what they're actually trying to do is to manipulate the situation, to exercise power, and normally, of course, in their own interests. Knowledge is power in that sense. To put it another way, the processes by which we come to know things, in technical terms, epistemological processes, are socially constructed. Society determines what processes of thought will allow you to arrive at conclusions, what methodologies are allowed, and it does so in order to favour the people in positions of power in that society. So a caricatured example for you would be the thought that, well, science as a methodology is a way of arriving at knowledge which serves to cement the influence of scientists as a group, and therefore it doesn't actually have any privileged claim on the truth. And when people make scientific claims, they're not really interested in what the truth is, they're simply trying to assert their own power. And of course then scientists will get into cahoots with politicians and big business and so on, and the biases of the group or the groups in question will affect the claims that they're making. And so in the context of science, the point would be not just that individual scientists making truth claims now, but historically, science as a pursuit was invented by white Western men, Foucault would point out. And therefore, the biases of white Western men are just kind of fundamentally hardwired, baked into the system. Science, however you try to do it, if you are doing science, you're going to be forwarding the interests of the white Western men who devised the methodologies by which the scientific enterprise is carried out. So then suppose somebody comes to you with a proposition, a claim that looks like a claim about truth, and you try and work out whether the proposition is true. Foucault would say, you're missing the point. If somebody comes to you with a claim about anything in the universe, you should not be trying to figure out whether that claim is true. What you should be trying to do is to analyse how political claims and claims to power are suffused within or hidden under that truth claim. The truth claim, remember, is just a political or a power claim in disguise. And the whole aim of discourse is to uncover those hidden power dynamics within conversations that purport to be about facts. In fact, dominant groups want, sometimes without even realising it, just to maintain their power, and they do that by making these purported truth claims. Somebody who makes a truth claim might think they're saying something about the truth of the way the universe is, but in fact what they're doing is just a disguised form of a disguised attempt to manipulate the social situation or the political situation they're in their own interests. So the purpose of all dialogue is to expose what's going on under the surface. In other words, to deconstruct the dialogue. To deconstruct means to expose the hidden power dynamics within a claim about truth. So, Michel Foucault. Thirdly, Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw introduced the idea of intersectionality, which remember we talked about a few videos ago. Intersectionality is the claim that a person's identity is not just comprised of the particular one group you might happen to notice about them, white, but an intersection of a range of different groups, white, married, British, male, for example. And the intersection of all the different groups that an individual belongs to defines that person. They're not really an individual as such, they're a member of the intersection of all those groups. Now, Kimberly Crenshaw was interested in how that observation led to a critique of postmodernism. She was working within that school, but she had a critique for it. Remember that postmodernism, as represented by Michel Foucault, and obviously countless others, postmodernism says, well, when you hear a truth claim, you shouldn't really be trying to figure out whether it's true. You should be trying to uncover the hidden power dynamics disguised under the surface of the truth claim, to deconstruct the discourse or the dialogue. Well, she pointed out that that's something that you can't do if you are at the intersection of lots of oppressed groups. Put it another way, if you happen to be, Kimberly Crenshaw might say, a poor black woman, you're 3 times oppressed. You're at the intersection of 3 oppressed groups, and you're not in a position to uncover the hidden power dynamics within discourses that you're engaged in or that you hear. What that means is that postmodernism is wrong, Kimberly Crenshaw would say. The problem with it is there's one thing that can't be deconstructed. Oppression can't be deconstructed. And so there's one objective truth that we definitely can all agree on, is that some people are oppressed. Oppression exists. So in one sense, it looks like a backtracking slightly from postmodernism. In another sense, it's sort of a development of postmodernism. It's a way of articulating that amid all the swirl of subjectivity where postmodernism leaves us, the one thing that we know to be true, the one objective fact about the universe, is that certain groups of people who lie at the intersections of these oppressed groups are oppressed. Systemic oppression is the one true reality in the universe, and everything is about uncovering that truth. So, those 3 thinkers are stepping stones along the way to contemporary critical theory. Now, having listened to all that, you may well be feeling in a little bit of a whirl about, like, where does all this stuff land? And what I want to show you in the next video, so hang on for tomorrow, in the next video is how this takes shape in modern critical theory, in the modern world, and in the kinds of dialogues that you may have seen or encountered in the media or elsewhere, and we'll start moving towards a biblical and Christian critique of those points. But for now, I think that's enough. The Lord bless you. I'm looking forward to seeing you all very soon. Bye for now.